All right, hey there, Pyre Crew, and welcome. Today we are going to be talking about washing. So, what exactly is a wash? Now, we touched on this briefly, a few episodes ago in the glazing video. Washing is the brother to glazing, but instead of being extremely controlled the way that we were with glazing, with this we have a little bit more liberty. And that being said, we want to load the paint up with a little bit more paint, and we want to cover that surface, making sure that we are, really getting that paint into the crevices and surfaces and, all kinds of areas for a variety of techniques, including shading, weathering, and so many more that we are going to talk about here. Washing does not have to be a chaotic mess. It can also be somewhat controlled, kind of something in between a glaze and a really, really heavy wash. So I love the versatility of this. I love the ability to use it to create really, really fast groups of miniatures. And so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and hop on over to the table. I'm going to show you a few methods, A, to wash, and then B, to use some of the other techniques that we've been using to clean up and amplify the effect of those washes. Go ahead and come on with me over to the table and we will jump right into this, you guys. Hey there, Pyre Crew. So welcome to the table. Today, of course, we are working on doing washes. So we talked a little bit in that intro about washes and why they are useful, and essentially we want to create a lot of contrast as quickly as we can, and specifically we are trying to create that contrast in a very, very loose way. So here on my hand, you can tell I've mixed my own wash. I like to mix my own washes just out of paint and water. I don't use a ton of mediums for this, and you are always more than welcome to, and sometimes it helps with surface tension. We do have a lot of paint loaded onto the brush, and what we want to do is, what I like to do is essentially a version of that pushing method. Remember, where you push the paint and let it up? But essentially when we do this, or at least when I do this, I have much more paint loaded onto the brush. And as you can see, it's really filling in those recesses very, very well. So I'm showing you on this leg, and next I'm going to take it over to the other leg, and I actually want to do a wash on this green for you, because then after we do that wash, I want to clean that green up a little bit. So again, we're just working it into all of these sections, and we might even thin it down just a little bit more. We're just washing and washing. This is a very fun technique because, it doesn't take a ton of mastery, but there's still some little tips and tricks, and we still want to kind of just be aware of how and where we are pushing the color. So I always try to push my washes away from my highlights. That way they don't get too dark on me. So just like that. There is our wash. I'm going to go ahead and take a second and dry it off with a hairdryer. So as you can tell, the recesses are much, much darker now, and that's all due to the wash. Now, we can continue to wash just the resources. This is more referred to as a pin wash. I just like to think of this as careful washing, just to kind of get these details a little bit more hammered out. But even then, we're not being super, super careful with how we do this. We're just making sure that they get filled in, to be honest. But again, always using some kind of directional pushing technique. So probably the most careful form of washing is what is referred to as pin washing. And this is essentially where we are really just trying to focus and create some shadows on these very, very embedded details right here without getting the wash in a lot of other places. So what I do when I pin wash is I will come over and put a gloss varnish down, and that way what it allows us to do is it allows us to use the capillary action of the paint, and it will spread itself along this line or along these specific details. So just like before, I'm going to load up my brush and very, very carefully come in, and I just really want to touch it. And as you can see, it spreads along that line. And so what we're going to do is just kind of create a series of these dots and wiping away any of the extra. And you can see it right there, how it spreads along the surface. And it'll do the same thing with these, where if we place it in this upper portion, it will spread through the rest of it. And I'm going to see if I can capture it here for you, just like that. And if we apply more pressure, it'll push more liquid into it, and that will allow us to get a better reaction. Now, I'm using my finger. You can use a Q-tip or something similar. I just going to do what's easier. But what we can do is we can just do a series of these small little pin drops, and what it does is it just spreads that wash along those lines, and it creates a very high level of detail for us very, very quickly without getting the wash into a lot of other parts. Now, other ways to improve this technique would be to use a smaller brush. I'm using a Winsor & Newton size 1 right now. I actually don't have a smaller brush than that currently. But you can also kind of pull the wash along if you do so desire to. So I wanted to cover this really, really quickly for you guys, just to make sure that I was covering all of the washing techniques that I am familiar with. So with that being said, we're going to hop back and keep on going. Once we've had enough of that though, we can come back in with our other techniques, probably for me in this case, some kind of layering technique with this green that we started off with. And we are going to just work a little bit on top of this. And essentially what this does, this careful reapplication of this base coat, is it allows us to kind of get rid of that washed effect, which looks a little bit messy. And it brings back some of the contrast as well. So whenever I do a wash, I always will come back and do this step, because I never want to leave it looking in that washed alone state. And as you can tell, it's just coming right back. But now we also have those even darker shadows. And again, so now we're just really doing layering. But as you can tell, the effect is very, very nice. And we can continue to layer it up from there. And it's a very, very fantastic effect. Something else that I want to talk about just kind of here in the video is, when do you want to use this? Generally, you want to use a wash if there's either if you're painting models very, very fast, if you're wanting to work through a lot of models in a very fast amount of time. Number 2, if there's a lot of detail that's going to be difficult to work into. So like, a wash might be really nice to use on this Aquila here in order to, work in some kind of shadow or something like that. But just always remember that working over the wash is always going to pop it out a little bit more. And that little bit of effort always goes an incredibly, incredibly long way. The other thing to remember too with this is that you want there to be an accumulation, but don't let that accumulation get out of control, because it very quickly can. Of course, you don't want to waste your paint or your pre-mixed washes, and it can be a very, very nice way of doing that. So we already talked about the other, ways that washes were effective, or glazes were effective in the previous one with the tinting. And we actually did that on this model. That's what we were showing you before here when we first started. So if you guys want to learn more about that, head back to the glazing video and watch that. And, I'm sure you guys will learn a ton. So that's really it on washes. Washes are pretty simple. There's not a ton of complexity to them. The main thing that you want to remember is to push to where you want the wash to accumulate and rest, and then come back and clean up that wash, if you're not trying to be too speedy. So thank you guys so much though for the support, and watching these videos. If you guys want to support me even more, you can head over to Patreon and support me for as little as $1. But don't forget that $5 gets you a treasure trove of tutorial content, over 30 hours of it, in fact, and it is absolutely chock-a-block full of just about any technique that you can think of. So thank you guys again so much for watching, and hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Happy painting. Bye.